Good afternoon. I am Suzanne Hilser-Wiles, President of Begley & Associates. Thank you for joining us for GG+A's ongoing series, Fundraising in a Public Health Crisis. I'm joined by my colleagues, Christine Begley and Ann Kohn. Among the GG+A clients Chris and Ann have served between them are the Getty Trust, Lyric Opera of Chicago, the California Academy of Sciences, and the Milwaukee Art Museum. Before joining GG+A, Chris served as a senior fundraiser at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Ann has been the managing director of Bristol Riverside Theater and associate managing director of Shakespeare Theater Company. We are also joined by our very special guest, Eve Jeffers, senior vice president for external affairs at the Art Institute of Chicago and a GG+A client with whom I have the great pleasure of working. At a time when so many of you are experiencing serious loss of operating dollars, we know that philanthropy is one of the few ways you have to manage this crisis. We are hosting this webinar today to help you as your institutions develop their own ideas for addressing this unprecedented situation. Now let me turn it over to Chris to begin our discussion.
Thanks, Suzanne, and hello, everyone. We know it's a really busy, even chaotic time, and it can be difficult to know what to focus on or even where to begin. So we wanted to start with 4 concrete steps that you and your teams can be taking right now. I know a number of you are already doing some of these things, but we hope you find some useful tidbits today, and we have some great examples to share with you throughout the presentation. I also want to recognize that we have a wide variety of organizations on this webinar. You all have some very different business models, so there's going to be nuance to what I'm saying to how you might enact it in your organization. So the first thing, as you see, is to stay connected. Because fundraising is a relationship business after all. Staying connected with your constituents is the single most important thing you can do right now. And it's what you all do best. So it's really time to intensify that work. And of course, with everything you do in fundraising, you'll want to segment your audiences. So for your top donors, if you haven't yet, call them, check in, see how they're managing, see how they're feeling. If appropriate, keep calling them on a regular basis as you would any friend or your great aunt. For those of you concerned with reaching out to donors, we can tell you that we've heard numerous stories of donor gratitude from our clients who have personally connected with their donors. I promise you no one's going to be unhappy to hear from you. Their response, of course, is going to differ depending on their situation, but you will know who needs reaching out most, but don't go dark right now on them. For your members and patrons, we recommend you reach out personally by phone to as many of them as possible. You might develop talking points for your staff about the measures your institution is taking so they can speak about that. And set up a plan of regular email communications addressed specifically to them as members or subscribers. You want them to feel special and part of your family. We're recommending to reach out every 7 to 10 days if possible, assuming you have content to be sharing with them. Longer 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, if that works for you all, but let your content drive that. You might consider things like hosting a town hall for your members with your director, or a member talks with your content experts. This is the time to get creative, as we're going to talk about later in this webinar, and a great time to start to build on your internal collaborations with your content experts as well. So you'll also want your ticket buyers, e-newsletter subscribers, and general audiences to stay connected through a regular plan of email communication that's letting this community know how you're helping. And you're helping by pushing out content, right? And giving people ways to stay connected and with whatever your art form is. There are so many good examples right now of institutions doing this, and we'll share a few later in this presentation. We recommend that your email communications, at least in these initial weeks, come directly from your leadership. People really want to hear from leaders right now, and we also want to be as personal as possible with our communications right now. So the second point is to extend memberships and subscriptions and offer refunds immediately. So for those that have had to cancel performances, we've seen many organizations immediately offer refunds, which is a fantastic way to build loyalty. Make it easy for your ticket and subscription purchasers, and they will be very grateful. If you've already offered refunds, but you did not offer an option to donate your ticket proceeds, don't be shy about following up with those folks and asking them to do so. Most people are going to be willing to donate their ticket proceeds to you to help right now. For our memberships, you will want to extend memberships for the amount of time you will be closed. But if you can, you might even extend longer. This kind of goodwill acknowledges that your members may be impacted financially, but that you still value them. For some of you that, with large memberships, this are very small operating budgets, this may be really difficult. So you might think about segmenting. You think about members who've been with you for maybe 5 years or 10 years or longer, and can you extend those? Or calling people if they have lapsed and seeing if an extension, can we offer you 6 months to stay a part of our family? We want you to enjoy us as an institution, and that will help to build loyalty in the long run. There are a lot of small things that you can do to show kindness and gratitude to your members right now. This may be a time also to offer payment plans, complimentary memberships or tickets to healthcare workers or other select groups, etc. We have heard a lot of really wonderful stories about members renewing early, donors really stepping up already. So we believe you will gain far more by being generous yourself as an institution. Third, plan now for missed events and performances. Your audiences are going to be really eager to come back to you when things reopen. Be prepared with a plan of member and donor events that make them feel special and keep them close once we can all reopen. Finally, ask for gifts. Do not be afraid. As Suzanne said, with most arts and cultural institutions experiencing a total loss of their earned revenue streams, now is the time to deeply engage audiences through philanthropy. Contributions are what will keep the arts alive, and your donors know that. It is not, we've heard from some clients that they feel like it's tone deaf to be asking for gifts. In the arts especially, it's out there everywhere of the impact of this crisis on you all. So people know that you need the money to survive. So if you have anyone with a proposal in front of them already, do follow up with them in an appropriate and thoughtful way, of course. If you are in the midst of gift conversations, ask your donors if they're willing to move forward. Being sensitive and responsive to where they are in their thinking will help keep them by your side. And as you will hear from Anne in a moment, be bold and creative in asking your broad public to support you now using mission-driven messaging. Also, don't forget about your foundation partners. They will be making emergency grants, and you will see them step up in a big way. I just saw an announcement about a fund in New York City being spearheaded by Bloomberg Philanthropies to help $75 million fund to help nonprofits. This is the kind of thing that happened that we saw after 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis, and we will see it again. So make sure you're connecting with your foundation partners and including asks for operating support. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne now and she's going to talk about some guiding principles to keep you on track during this time.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. We are in uncharted territories with this pandemic, and no one knows what the next few weeks or months will bring. So we wanted to provide some basic principles that we think can guide your fundraising efforts as you move forward. The first is to be honest with yourself and with your public. Be transparent and clear about what this crisis means for your organization, and that's really critical, even when the news is difficult. Last week, when the Metropolitan Museum of Art announced its projected $1 million deficit, it also announced proactive plans to create an emergency fund by reallocating resources used for acquisitions and programming, as well as additional fundraising efforts. They have shown the severity of their situation and how they are working to mitigate it. While this type of messaging is being developed, it's also critical to prepare for what questions you think will follow and how you will communicate those lessons learned as you move forward, because this gives you a reason to keep connecting with your audiences, as you'll want to keep them updated on your progress. The second guiding principle is be bold. This is not a time for business as usual, folks. You will need to be bold in your thinking and actions in order to raise what is likely to be an unprecedented level of general operating support. One great example, when cancellations began, Shakespeare Theatre Company did not waste any time. Staff and board leadership acted quickly and cohesively to develop a plan for emergency fundraising and created the Phoenix Fund. This messaging that they sent primarily through their social media included clear and compassionate messaging from artistic leadership. It also had a principal gift component with the announcement of a $1 million matching gift, and a way for supporters to act and to ensure that their beloved cultural institution will weather this storm. Thinking boldly also means thinking creatively. Are there collaborations that will strengthen your work, either internally or externally? What new content and programming can we develop to stay connected to our audiences? As you think more expansively, make sure that you are mission focused at all times. The Philadelphia Orchestra's mission states that they are committed to excellence, innovation, and creativity on and off stage. Without skipping a beat, the orchestra gave a final performance before closing its doors, but to an empty concert hall. Thousands streamed the performance live, and many more tuned in to WRTI, Philadelphia's classical music station, to hear rebroadcasts. Keeping mission front and center is the best way to keep your supporters connected. This type of creativity and connection should be shared far and wide. Encourage your patrons and supporters to share these extraordinary opportunities with their own network to continue building your organization's community of supporters. In this time when we're all feeling a sense of isolation, now is the time to think outside of the box about connecting on a human level, which is what you all excel at. The last and most important guiding principle is to ask for gifts. As Chris said, at this point, everyone is well aware of the losses you are sustaining. As you are crafting your messaging, it should reflect a culmination of the previous principles. The Seattle Art Museum has done this well with a compelling message to their patrons from the director and CEO about how they can stay at home with Sam. This message briefly describes the creative ways patrons can stay connected to the art, including links to their blogs, video series, and educational resources. It also shares 3 distinct ways in which patrons can support the museum and its mission: becoming a member, contributing to the SAM Fund, and donating unused tickets. This simple message lets people know how the museum will be there for them and how patrons can be there for the museum. So now I'll turn it back over to Chris, who will talk about planning for a new reality.
Thanks, Anne. So the shuttering of your doors for weeks and even months is highlighting what fundraisers have long known. Many arts and cultural institutions have an untenable financial model. Many exist with little or no cash reserves, have invested too heavily in buildings without growing an operating base to support the building, or they rely too heavily on any one income stream, et cetera. This weekend, Holland Cotter wrote a manifesto for art museums published in the New York Times, and it speaks about a reckoning of mission and purpose. But this crisis is also calling for a reckoning of the financial model. The first 4 points on the slide are areas that those of you who are development directors have some control over. The last 4 points are larger institutional moves that we hope you may be able to influence within your organization. So quickly, operating support as part of every ask. This should become standard business practice. We encourage you to think about restricted gifts as budget relieving, and for designated endowment gifts, we recommend they always include a component that is budget relieving. Second, build endowment. We've been working with a number of museums recently on endowment campaigns, and we see this as a huge opportunity for many of you. The message now will be completely the right one. It will be clear that the institutions that come out the strongest after this crisis are those with larger endowments. 3, demonstrate impact. We know, research has shown us again and again that demonstrating impact is important to our donors. It becomes doubly important now. So as you communicate the economic impact of this crisis on your institution, also be sure to articulate your impact on the community. All of you are doing really great work, so remind people how you're enriching lives, encouraging learning, etc. Use storytelling to demonstrate your impact in powerful ways. Finally, some of you probably have a very small handful of generous board members who provide the majority of your funding each year. It's really important to broaden the circle, both at the top, but also within your mid-range donors. As Suzanne said, philanthropy is going to be your institution's most important tool right now, and you want to be sure that you have the widest possible base of support. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Suzanne, who's going to have a conversation with our special guest, Eve Jeffers.
Thank you, Chris and Ann, for these practical ideas for our colleagues in the arts. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Eve Jeffers. Eve is Senior Vice President for External Affairs at the Art Institute of Chicago, where she oversees communications, marketing, public affairs, development, and membership. She works closely with the museum's president and trustees to fulfill the Art Institute's mission as both a public-facing civic leader and an eminent cultural icon. Thank you, Eve, for being here with us today, particularly since we know just how busy you are overseeing all of these areas at a time when the Art Institute is faced with public closing.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, Suzanne.
So I am going to dive right in. How is the Art Institute communicating with members and donors right now? And in what ways is this different from how you might be communicating with them otherwise?
You know, in so many ways, it is not different. We are listening, we are thanking, we are storing, and we're moving toward the next ask, looking for the right time to ask. As many of you know, our donors want to know what we want them to do, and they generally tell us when and how to ask. So the most important thing, as always, is just keeping the conversations open and letting them give us a roadmap to asking them for the right thing at the right time.
So that leads me to my next question, Eve. How is your individual giving team at the museum staying in touch with prospects while the museum is closed? And how are you helping the team to be as effective as possible during this time?
Well, this is hard. All of this is really hard right now, but it's not complicated. You know, we're fortunate to work at an institution that has the resources to give everyone the technology and the support that they need. But I am really fortunate to have the most thoughtful and driven and smartest and dedicated colleagues managing our donor portfolios. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. It's really a solid prospect management program like ours, which was designed by my colleague, Christina Polofsky, which makes it easy for them to stay focused on what they do so beautifully, which is talking to donors, listening and caring, taking it one family at a time.
And how's the museum communicating about the economic impact that the closing will have? You have a very big special exhibition on view right now. So how are you talking to your patrons and friends about the impact?
Well, the short answer is that we're not. Economic impact is really not our external message at this moment. Our external message is mission, mission, and mission. We share a singular collection with our city, with the world. We create, we inspire greater depths of understanding. You know, the economic impact, I know we're all trying to sort out internally what the financial implications are going to be short-term, mid-term, and long-term, working that through with our board, our staff, and our colleagues. My colleagues, especially led by our AVP Amy Allen, will craft just the right messages for our donors at different tiers, helping them to feel that we're being transparent, that we value them always, but always focused on mission, not economics.
So how do you anticipate current events might impact your major gifts fundraising for the Art Institute? And how are you working with the museum director and communicating with the board? You just mentioned communications with the board. How are you all working together to manage this time?
Yeah. Well, you know, if we've been through crises before, we know the impact on fundraising will be to delay some conversations, but also to accelerate other conversations. Every family situation is different and their reactions will be different. But we, I think all of us have communities that are incredibly philanthropic and engaged, and we are so fortunate in that. We are also at the Art Institute extremely fortunate in our leadership, our director and our board leadership, who have been through this before. They've led campaigns in other places. They understand how we need to work through this, and that philanthropy will come back and it will be strong. For a less experienced director, you know, I think having data of the sort that you at GG+A are collecting is going to be really important, just to help see that philanthropy will stay strong, that we're in this for the long run. If anything, I think we can all use this experience, while it might not help us in the short term, but in the long term, use this experience to help your director or your board understand what a professional, highly functioning development shop looks like.
That's a really important point, Eve. And as we know, many of the people on the call today work with board members who are less experienced. In addition to helping them understand what a professional development shop looks like, are there one or two other things you would think about that we might use the opportunity of this crisis to educate boards about?
Well, you know, investing in true major gift work is the key. I read all the listservs and all the great comments and thoughts from our peers around the country. I do see many organizations feeling a little bit panicked over their galas being canceled or postponed. And you know me so well, Suzanne, you know my opinions about this, but you know, this might be a great opportunity to revisit why you're having galas and whether you could shift your resources into much more impactful and sustainable major gift work.
And I will jump in here and add, because Eve and I have had a lot of conversations about gala fundraising. And one of the projects we did with the Art Institute that I would really encourage everybody to think about was a true clear-eyed analysis of where does the gala money come from. I think there is a closely held belief at a lot of institutions that gala money comes from people who wouldn't give to you otherwise, and that may be true, but it isn't an assumption that I would just run with. I think at the Art Institute, as we looked at the galas that they've had historically, Eve's team really working with us and analyzing the data, were able to identify which of the galas really did bring in new money, build community, do all of those wonderful things, and where we might focus that effort rather than just assume that the people engaged in galas wouldn't be engaged with the museum otherwise. That is a project I would absolutely recommend everybody on this call do while we're in this period. Finally, for our listeners, I wanted to share that before Eve joined the Art Institute, she served as a senior advancement leader at both Northwestern and the University of Chicago. So she has a broad experience working with a very high-performing fundraising organization. So Eve, are there lessons you learned during the last recession that are influencing how you might approach fundraising in this period?
Sure, of course. And I do want to just acknowledge your reference to my, my employers, Suzanne, because I do acknowledge for everyone on the call, I'm certainly very fortunate to be working at well-resourced and well-run institutions that have built their endowments, that have really strong track records of leadership and philanthropy. And I understand that this is a very hard situation for mid-sized and smaller organizations. But we all know from the last recession that American philanthropy is strong. It will shift its focus for a time, and we are going to work harder. But it will be there and it will come back. So in the meantime, as you're all doing, we just steward our donors as well as we can and demonstrate leadership and responsibility. You know, I think messages that are laced with panic over economic situations near term will actually undermine your position. You know, from planning campaign strategies that donors give to strength and they give to leadership. And we need to be careful not to undermine our leadership position with messages that feel too insecure.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Eve. And I think something that we see in questions and comments from clients, there's a lot of uncertainty about how to balance some of what Anne was talking about, a realistic assessment of where you are now, with a clear understanding that we as an institution have a strategy for managing this, so that people feel like they're investing in something that's going to be strong coming out of this. And we know that that's a particular challenge for some of you whose operating budgets are most directly impacted by the loss of operating revenue right now.
Absolutely. This is hard. I get it. It's really hard, especially in the smaller organizations, but it will help you demonstrate the value of investing in professional prospect management and in really great major gift teams.
Thank you so much, Eve. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Eve, thank you again for your perspective and your thoughtful comments. We so appreciate you making time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you, Suzanne, and take good care.
Thank you. Thanks also to Chris and Anne, and to all of you for tuning in today. We had almost 500 participants, and we appreciate the questions you have sent in, which we will be addressing through our thought leadership pieces and on our website in the weeks ahead. Later this week, we will be sharing with all participants some data regarding giving to the arts during the recession. In the meantime, please reach out to any of us via the Contact Us button on our website and connect to us on LinkedIn. Stay safe, everyone.